This week, Margaret Flowers thinks it's about fucking time that we get some more activists in the halls of the mighty, from occupying the streets to occupying Congress. Next up, here's how you can make your community an anti-corporate land of the free, plus rice paper against the TPP, and finally, let's Google how not to be over-consuming plastic asshats. But first, you are an activist. I wouldn't consider myself an activist, she said, swiping away the word. Being sure not to offend with all of her work, does it hurt your feelings to know she leans left while thinking straight? Go on, take the bait. There are some confrontations worth making, and you aching to prove that she's wrong for trying. To what possible end? That she hopes to mend a world, a piece, a sliver. What's the point in being a giver? In this world of takers, call your shot. Keep what's yours, hide what you got, but don't call her an activist. There lies your knife to stab and to twist. Let's not call it this. Let's see, concerned citizen, is that PC? Well, is PC even PC? I don't want to get too political. Yes, I know I do a little, but that's just a few hours a week or with my church or tutoring kids down the street because they don't get what they need in this system. Fuck. I crossed the line. Now that glint in your eyes turns red. It's feeding time. Out of you a passion fashioned from Fox lies and capitalist headlines, like red meat to a bloodhound. Randian concepts abound. Ideological talking points fly, puffed up like an eagle. This well-rehearsed diatribe scalps all debate, decapitates facts, and your gloating opinion stands by the drenched guillotine gleaming with pride. On the other side, a well-meaning, left-leaning, non-activist sighs, orders another drink, and resolves to sit it out this time. It's not my thing anyway. It's politics, and I wouldn't know what to say. And the ones on the right are always so loud. I just don't want to get into it, you know? Just let me sit with my drink and think about how I can help quietly and visibly so no one will notice, no one will fight me or want to indict me, because they won't see me or see what I've done. Maybe they'll just wake up one day and say, oh shit, this is better, great. And then I can smile. No, I did good. And doesn't that sound good enough? Fuck, I wish it did. I wish the world worked that way, but it never did. And I know it's uncomfortable and you don't want any trouble, but fear is a mind killer and we're starting to lose you. America, America, your brain is on life support, gasping for air to keep some ways clear. But they're getting clogged by the bog of insanity, dripping ideas to quelch your humanity, holy water in a state-owned IV, but God can't save you. No, you gotta say, stand up and raise your voice and call it this way. That shit is fucked up. And yes, you're an activist, goddamn right. And speaking of right, there's no fucking thing as right-leaning good for our country. Think I'm wrong? Well, prove it. History's no fool and neither am I. Show me where your way is better for more. More than the selfish cunt pricks up on high. Show me how wars on the world, on the poor, have made us all better, safer, and stronger. Show me how your sexist agenda should make women swoon with delight, quiet her fight while you rummage around in her uterus, hoping to find the ills of society hiding behind an IUD. Is it just me? Or is it creepy and sick that you're so obsessed with who sucks whose dick? Yes, I'm going there. I've gone there and I'll go there again, and again. Till the humans who care, the ones who want humans to be well and dare to hope for a world where equality rings louder than patriot bells in the West Wing, when humans who see that the right has done wrong, and come on, it's no mystery. History tweets #facepalm at the quiet and calm, just like the last ones, the ones before that, who let the masses be taken by takers who sit far to the right, sowing fights from the seeds reaped off our backs with our own slack. The world won't change just because you sit at a bar, a low-light cliche, swirl your drink and think to yourself, man, this world is kind of fucked up. I hope it gets better. It won't. You're an activist. Be an activist. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So now that we're getting political and calling it like it is, calling ourselves activists and doing something about it, let's jump straight into our first story and interview. Now, if you've ever been to a rally or event in Washington, D.C. in the past 5-6 years, chances are that Margaret Flowers had something to do with it. In fact, she might also have had something to do with that event or action outside of D.C. For the past 8 years, she's been organizing on a local and national level, full-time. Along with the sites It's Our Economy and Flush the TPP, a site that may sound familiar to you guys, Popular Resistance, the site she founded with partner Kevin Zeese, is basically a go-to for all the news that's unfit to print in corporate media, plus an event calendar for actions and rallies, plus links and tools to drive your distaste for the corporatized state into full-blown activism. Zeese and Flowers work together to organize, execute, and report on actions that push for a variety of causes, be it anti-fracking, anti-TPP, pro-civil rights, and more. The underlying theme to all of these, however, is the fight against the system, bought and sold, of, for, and by the rich, white, and old, pushing to break the corporate mold. And her next endeavor is to occupy the Senate. Dr. Margaret Flowers is running for U.S. Senate as a Green Party candidate from Maryland. Between her organizing, occupying, and now campaigning, I got a chance to sit down with her and talk politics. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Take a look. You are a pediatrician, but you left your practice in 2007. Why was that?
Well, I practiced for 15 years, and over that time, it was just becoming clearer and clearer that our healthcare system is not about health at all. It's actually puts obstacles in the way of people being able to get the care that they need, and doctors and other health professionals being able to practice. So I just decided I needed to do advocacy, and if I wanted to be effective at that, I needed to do that full time. So I left practice just to focus on changing that system.
So give me a couple of examples of how you came to this realization that the system was broken.
When you admit a child to the hospital and the insurance company tells you how many days that child can stay in the hospital, and it has nothing to do with what would be appropriate care for them. It takes that control out of your hands. You have to fight with them if you feel like a child needs to stay longer. You write a prescription, and then your patient goes to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist calls you and says you need authorization. And I'm like, well, isn't a prescription authorization? Like, didn't I just order this medicine? And just, if you want to get any kinds of treatments or get in to see appropriate specialists, it's just all these obstacles and financial obstacles. The conversations become about, can the patient afford what they need, rather than, is this what they need? That's the wrong conversation.
In 2011, you helped lead the occupation of D.C. at Freedom Plaza. And since then, you've also occupied outside the FCC for net neutrality. You've staged hundreds of actions and events, not just in the DC area, but across the country, with Popular Resistance and Flush the TPP. So what brought you specifically to do that, and why did you choose that particular path of advocacy?
Well, it's been a journey all the way. It's still a learning process. And so for me, it was, 2009, 2010, I was very involved in the health reform process in Washington, D.C., and trying to push for what the majority of people in this country want and need, a single-payer healthcare system. And we kept being told that was off the table. And so we protested, we lobbied, we did whatever. And that whole experience showed me how kind of corrupt the system is, how controlled it is, and it's not about what people want or need. And also it showed me the power of direct action to influence that process. And so I started seeing also that if I'm just fighting for a single-payer healthcare system, I'm never going to build enough political power to get that. It's really about seeing that this is connected. This is part of the broader struggle for social, economic, and racial and environmental justice. And if we all work together and start being more strategic, we can't just go out and do a symbolic protest. That's a waste of time. Mm-hmm. But if we're really strategic about what we do, then we can start to affect change and build a movement that's going to shift political power.
So talk a little bit about that interconnectedness. You're quoted as saying, "I view the struggle for healthcare as part of a broader social, racial, economic, and environmental justice movement." Expound a little bit on that.
Well, if we just gave people access to healthcare, we wouldn't have a healthier society, because the majority of our health is impacted by things outside of the health office. It's, do you have a home? Do you have a job with a living wage? Do you have adequate education? Can you get clean water? Healthy food in your community? All of these things have a significant impact on our health. And so if we want a healthy society, we've got to get, change all of these things. And also, I think that being a physician puts me in a mindset, which many others share, is that you want to go to the root of the problem. You don't want to just be treating the symptoms. And so, you just get deeper and deeper, and it's like, well, it's actually not about just providing housing. It's about this whole economic and political system that exploits people and exploits the environment, and that's got to change.
And do you feel that elected officials, and I'll get to your campaign in a second, but do you feel that elected officials, because a lot of people say that, oh well, Obama can't do anything about it. The system is so rigged that even if you have good intentions on the way in, by the time you're in, you really can't do anything. Do you agree with that sort of like hands up, I can't do anything about it?
No, it's a very convenient excuse, and our politicians are just experts at making excuses. Because look, the Obamacare was passed only with votes from Democrats. So this whole thing about we couldn't get enough votes to do a single payer when 80% of registered Democrats support single payer was completely false. If Obama wanted to get the votes, he would get the votes. Look at the fast track fight that we just had earlier this year. Despite millions of people in the country speaking out against it, politicians that understood and didn't like it, they were able to, and you saw, Obama even came to Capitol Hill at the last moment to like twist arms and force members of Congress to vote for fast track, and got only exactly the minimum number of votes that they needed to pass it. Nobody else was going to put their political career on the line by being associated with it. So when they want the votes, when they want to get something, they can do it. So, to me, that's a complete excuse, and it doesn't hold any water at all. He's very much a corporatist and neoliberal warmongering person, like many of the other politicians we have.
Right, and of course that speaks to the whole concept that Democrat or Republican, it doesn't really matter, the label. And so you are actually running for U.S. Senate with the Green Party. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that a lot of people feel that you're either an activist or you're gonna feed into the system. How do you feel about that, sort of duality, and is that a juxtaposition, or do you feel that what you're doing is part of your activism?
I have to say it's a very weird place for me right now, because I have been pushing from the outside and feeling like trying to work on the inside is a real waste of time. And so prior to this, I never put much resources or time into electoral politics at all. But I feel like we're starting to get into this interesting moment in time, both in the United States and globally, where these left political electoral movements are starting to arise. So we see in Greece Syriza, although it's not always an easy path. Definitely, Podemos in Spain. We see in Canada right now the NDP is leading in the polls, which is pretty amazing. So at some point we have to start to bridge that gap and try to create this alternative political movement that's going to replace the dysfunctional one that we have right now. And so I see this campaign is both trying to build that and also raise awareness for a lot of issues that aren't being discussed.
And what are some of your platforms for the campaign? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm running on a broad platform of economic, racial, and environmental justice, and within that, there's so much overlap and so many issues. But I want to bring attention to some really kind of key fights that are going on in Maryland right now, which is really just a microcosm of the same thing that's happening around the United States. So economically, we have tremendous wealth inequality. We have communities that have been disinvested in, and some of them are organizing to try to change that and create an alternative economic type of vision that really lifts people up. It's kind of anti-gentrification. Like, instead of like building these new fancy buildings, why don't we put that into like pathways to small businesses, cooperatives, alternative economics like credit unions, community credit unions, grocery co-ops, all these different things. So bringing attention to that is kind of an antidote. And also in Baltimore, we have a lot to talk about with police brutality, militarization of the police, mass incarceration. Martin O'Malley was kind of spearheading this whole arrest without probable cause thing that's thrown so many of our youth into jail and destroyed their possibilities for a future. When it comes to environmental justice, we're fighting off a huge fracked gas refinery that's being built right in a neighborhood of thousands of people in southern Maryland, and how we need to stop the fossil fuel infrastructure. Just stop it cold, no more investment, and move towards community-owned renewables is what I would favor. And, and the racial justice piece I talked on a little bit, but, we'll be talking about the failed drug war and a lot about also kind of the fact that we live in an empire, that people don't ever really talk about that, and that we're suffering from an empire economy, and we need to stop investing in military bases all around the world and start investing in really meeting our needs here at home and becoming a cooperative partner in the world instead of an aggressor. So those are kind of some of the main broad things we'll be talking about, as well as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, of course. So.
Well, right, and I'm curious because the Flush the TPP, which is one of the sites that you've started as well. A lot of things are coming up in October and November for that. So how will your campaign work with, and how will that affect your activism that you pretty much do constantly?
Well, I'll still be doing the activism constantly, and hopefully the campaign will follow me around while I'm doing it. Because, like I said, it's going to be an interesting experiment about how we bridge this. But I see that, the work that we do through activism is integral to change, and that's got to be part of the campaign as well, and continue once we get into office. We've got to keep fighting. This is really a battle. I mean, really. I mean, we don't have a lot of time here to really start to change things and turn our energy policy around, our economic policy around. So this is just another way to fight.
So it really seems like part of the message is that politicians need to be activists and activists should be politicians. Would that be a correct summary?
I mean, look at what's happening in Spain, in Barcelona, where they elected Ada Colau, the woman who was an anti-foreclosure activist. I think that we fight these things in the street, but at some point we need to be getting in there and be the ones that are writing the laws or meeting with these agencies that are supposed to be serving the public good and really starting to hold them accountable for whether they're doing that or not.
And finally, I tend to ask this of a lot of people on the left, particularly if they're interested in running for office. The far right, like the Tea Party, has done an excellent job of getting people like them, who think like them, in office. And the left has not done a good job of getting occupiers and left activists into office. And what would you say to people who, A, don't vote, or B, feel that any way feeding into the system is only going to be a negative return?
I can totally understand that. We live in a mirage democracy right now. It's a very rigged system. And when you only have a choice of a Democrat or Republican that have been pre-approved by Wall Street before they even get there, it is not really a choice. So I tell people, don't put a lot of your time into electoral politics right now. Really focus on movement building and activism. Unless, for the people who are feeling like they're ready to take that step into electoral politics, definitely do it. I mean, we've got to build up this political alternative of being independent. And I think we're starting to see some positive signs right now where you see like the Shama Sawants, who ran as a socialist, is also willing to talk to and work with Greens, and Greens are willing to work with a socialist alternative. And together it's much stronger. Like, I'd like to see more of that on the left. I'd like to see socialist, Labor Party, independent progressive parties that are actually independent of the Democrats. To make that, and Greens, like, working together and realizing that we agree on pretty much everything. So let's, help each other get into office.
The mirage of democracy. Damn, that should be a banner drop over the Capitol building. Just saying. To learn more about Margaret Flowers' campaign for Senate, check out flowersforsenate.org. And, of course, her activism and information sites, Popular Resistance, It's Our Economy, and Flush the TPP. And speaking of TPP, oh, goddamn this broken record shit. It really is brilliant, though, you have to admit. Not only name it something seizure-inducingly boring, but don't let the fucking thing die, so it's the political equivalent of Chinese water torture. And there's a joke somewhere in there about labor rights in China being left out of the TPP, but I'm no comedian, so let's just move on. There are big plans brewing for anti-TPP activists this fall and winter, but for now, we need to focus on our local communities. Because this fucker isn't just about a national or international corporate coup. This is about your schools, your farms, your food, your water, your air, your kids, your health, your work, your fucking everything. So, to kick off the fall fight against TPP, activists are calling for communities around the country to declare themselves TPP-free zones. Well, what does that mean? Well, as the name suggests, it's a zone that's TPP-free. I know, I'm an asshole. In other words, if the TPP is made into law, these communities will not obey the corporatocratic bullshit it brings with it. No shipping jobs overseas, no mass privatization, no GMOs, no corporate welfare, no widespread deregulation, no fracking, drilling, spilling, or planet grilling. Not here. Go fuck yourselves. The verbiage may vary slightly, but that's the basic gist. This pushback represents a precedent to fight precedent. Let me explain that a bit better. So basically, the Supreme Court has established through several decisions that corporations have the same rights as people. Some lawyers would refer to this as settled law. It represents a final judicial decision, even if it is contested. Abortion is another example, gay marriage yet another. Some lawyers claim that settled law is just a meaningless throwaway term used to avoid arguments and debate. Regardless, I'm not a lawyer. Either way, corporations do reap the benefits of the settled laws granted to them by our Supreme Court. And the TPP would not only uphold the settled law of corporate personhood, it would implement an international settled law that trumps even the Supreme Court. It would put into place international trade tribunals who would ensure that pesky governments don't get in the way of corporate deals like TPP, TTIP, and TISA. In other words, it completely overrides our elected officials, putting us under the jurisdiction of international corporations, not local, state, or federal governments. Fucked, right? Yes. Hence, this pushback. It may be a precedent that corporations run our country, but now it's also a precedent that we fight back. Several communities have already declared themselves TPP-free zones. Just like several communities have fought back against Citizen United, the 2010 Supreme Court decision that further opened up the floodgates for private money to rule over our elections. And just recently in the news, California may finally get the chance to see a voter instruction on the 2016 ballot calling for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. And as Move to Amend's website shows, there are over 500 resolutions currently in progress or already passed that fight back against this settled law of corporate personhood. And hell, Guatemala just told Monsanto to go suck on an Agent Orange canister, overturning a June law that would have given Monsanto reign over ancestral Mayan territories and traditional cultivation processes, aka not poisonous ones. All of these examples to say that there is a precedent to fight precedent. The power of the people is greater than that of the people in power. There's no justice in following unjust laws and other soundbite taglines that may be cliche, but are also very, very accurate. We the people can fight back against the TPP, against corporate power. You just gotta get your ass in gear. So, how do you get your ass in gear? To make your community a TPP-free zone, check out flushthetpp.org. We'll also put the exact link on our Facebook page so you can just click through to the fight against the corporate coup. Also, something to jot down in your calendars, there will be some big actions against the TPP in DC and elsewhere between November 14th and 18th as well. You can read more about that and pledge your support, again, via Flush the TPP. It's the picture of the toilet. Can't miss it. Now then, before we move on to a different subject entirely, I'd like to highlight the work of Japanese artist Yoko Inoue. I probably butchered that, I apologize. Yoko has had quite the track record of activist art, including a performance piece called Transmigration of the Soul, where she sat in an outdoor market on Canal Street unraveling sweaters with the American flag printed on them. Her latest work is called Rice Paper, and it will consist of a series of posters which she plans to display both in the US, where she lives, and in her home country of Japan. So what's rice paper? Well, as the prototype shows, it's anti-TPP art. Hard to tell from the limited resources of images online, but as Japan Times reports, the piece includes a headline reading "All the news that's unfit to print," a cynical take on the New York Times motto, who, like every other corporate news outlet, has been sheepishly silent about the deal. Also present, a comic strip featuring TP Peaceman, a loincloth-wearing, fan-wielding manga character with a rice ball for a hat, warning of the dangers of pesticides. Add to this hand-drawn maps, pie charts, and articles, and you have one hell of a strong, satirical, and boldly creative take on this bullshit deal, which would affect, of course, both the US and Japan. When asked why she felt that the TPP would be a bum deal for both the US and Japan, she replied, "Who benefits? It's the 1% who control all of the policies and trade. Maybe we, and the general public, don't realize it, but the corporations who want to benefit from the agreement are very, very tenaciously and meticulously planning everything possible to dismantle socioeconomic structures. When we start paying attention, we say, oh my God. Oh my fucking God, indeed. So now that you've taken the Flush the TPP pledge and gotten some poster board inspiration, how are you going to fight the TPP? Moving on, plastic. Well, wait, don't Google that yet. Let me finish this thought. How can we avoid using so much plastic? And why the fuck am I bringing this up? Well, even for those of you who have missed out on the video of the turtle with the plastic straw stuck in its nose, going through excruciating pain as two men attempt to remove it, even if you haven't seen that, or many other videos about plastic in the oceans, it's certainly no secret that plastic doesn't biodegrade very well. As this quick Google search just pointed out, one plastic bag takes about 1,000 years to degrade, meaning that your choice to grab a plastic bag for your plastic toothbrush and your plastic-wrapped candy bar and that plastic toy will haunt this planet more than 10 times longer than you'll be alive, just assuming that you don't make it to 120. And this isn't even being about being an environmentalist or speaking properly. I can't think of anyone, no matter how far right they are, who wants to go to a beach or wander through a beautiful forest only to step on a plastic Coke bottle or snag their foot in a plastic bag. It's fucking unnecessary and vehemently awful. And like anybody who's ever owned a septic tank, you know that shit adds up. According to this study that you'll likely never read through, 9 out of 10, that's 99%, of all seabirds will have plastic in them by 2050, due to A, the amount of plastic floating around in the oceans, and B, birds mistaking said plastic for food. And when there's about 6 times as much plastic in your kitchen than there is food, you'd probably also end up munching on someone's discarded Power Ranger or tampon wrapper. And obviously, seabirds aren't the only living things suffering under the weight of human stupidity and mindless consumption. Now let's just say that you didn't even give a shit about the turtle with the straw stuck in its nose, or the seals wrapped up in plastic wire. Let's just say that you're that much of a heartless asshole. This still affects you. Because as that plastic floats around in the world's oceans, it absorbs dangerous pollutants like PCBs, DDT, and PAH. These chemicals are highly toxic and have a wide range of chronic effects, including endocrine disruption and cancer-causing mutations. The concentration of PCBs and plastics floating in the ocean has been documented as 100,000 to 1 million times that of surrounding waters. And when animals eat these plastic pieces, the toxins are absorbed into their body and passed up the food chain. In other words, you will be ingesting those harmful toxins. In some kind of sick, poetic justice kind of way, the poisons leaching from the plastic we discard will find its way back to us, poisoning us for our carelessness. So, getting back to that Google search, just take a look at the first 2 results. Just on those 2 pages, you'll find some surprisingly easy and common sense ways to avoid using plastic. Like, for example, using matches instead of lighters or filling a metal one, reusing plastic bags from farmers markets, not using a goddamn straw. Just drink the water out of the glass, people. Avoid shit that's single use, like coffee pods or even tampons. Yes, ladies, it's called a diva cup. Google that as well. So now that I've brought up periods twice in one segment, I'm going to go ahead and leave on a high note. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. That does it for this week's episode. Please spread and share it with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. As always, check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in the show. There will also be a link to help support Occupy.com and the delicious dissent delivered daily thanks to donations like yours. It is a 501c3, so anything you can contribute is tax deductible and hugely appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out.